Comando Vermelho, Portuguese for Red Command or Red Commando, also known as CV, is a Brazilian criminal organization engaged primarily in drug trafficking, arms trafficking, protection racketeering, kidnappings for ransom, armored truck hijackings, loan sharking, irregular warfare, narco-terrorism, and turf wars against rival criminal organizations, such as Primeiro Comando de Capital and Terceiro Comando Puro. The Comando Vermelho structure is loosely hierarchical yet allows significant autonomy throughout the organization. While there is no one single boss, imprisoned senior leaders exercise authority over favela leaders, known as donos, who deliver rents to the prison leaders as a form of insurance scheme. Within this structure, there is significant freedom for gang members to run operations as they see fit. Members of the CV operate with a shared identity and a common set of norms, but negotiate separately with individual drug suppliers, known as matutos. The exact year that the Comando Vermelho was founded is officially 1979, stemming from a prison alliance between leftist guerrillas and common criminals housed together during the 1970s by Brazil's military dictatorship at Cândido Mendes, a maximum security Brazilian prison. Soon after their regime began in 1964, Brazil's military dictatorship faced a persistent challenge from leftist guerrilla rebels, made up largely of middle-class intellectuals. In hopes of delegitimizing the rebels, in the early 1970s the Brazilian government began placing those they captured in prison alongside common criminals. One such prison, Cândido Mendes, located on Ilha Grande, housed a mix of violent criminals and guerrillas in its notoriously brutal Block B, or the Pit. Inmates there were subject to frequent abuse at the hands of both their peers and the guards. The inmates banded together for mutual protection, shielding themselves from guard beatings and establishing a code of conduct for prisoners. Additionally, the guerrillas began to educate the common criminals with ideas about resistance, revolution, and social justice. As the alliance cemented, members introduced a common code of prison rules designed to promote loyalty among members, reduce violence within the prison, and advance the common cause of the prisoners, while still maintaining a degree of autonomy for individual members to act as they desired. In attempts to break up the alliance, prison officials moved inmate leaders to different wings and prisons, but this instead helped the group spread throughout the prison system. During this period, prison officials gave the group its name. One official called the group Comando Vermelho in a memo to his colleagues. The name was adopted first by the press and then later by the group itself. In 1979, sensing an impending democratization movement, newly installed President João Figueiredo and his military regime began to fear that they and members of their armed forces could face trial for human rights violations in a democratic system. To protect themselves, Figueiredo manipulated a grassroots movement demanding amnesty for thousands of political prisoners and exiles to insulate himself and his colleagues from potential indictments, and passed the sweeping 1979 amnesty law, protecting political prisoners and their government captors from prosecution. As a result, the leftist guerrilla elements of the CV were released from prison, weakening the group's ideological bent. Meanwhile, the CV began to spread beyond prison gates. While many of its original members were bank robbers, the group quickly became involved in the burgeoning cocaine market. CV members helped traffic drugs overseas for Colombian cartels and distributed cocaine into the local Rio de Janeiro market. The cocaine trade proved incredibly lucrative and the CV grew rapidly. By the end of 1985, the gang already controlled 70% of the drug market in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. During this period, the CV became increasingly involved in the provision of social services and administration of justice for the favela communities which it controlled. In exchange for the cooperation of favela residents, the CV prohibited theft, robbery, rape, and provided public goods like school supplies, medical equipment, massive profits, and food created incentives for different CV factions to splinter off as local leaders sought larger profit shares. Notable breakaway groups which emerged during this period include Terceiro Comando and Amigos dos Amigos. As these groups clashed over territory in Rio, violence rapidly increased throughout the city. A defining characteristic of the CV is their willingness to openly engage the state in armed confrontation. Since the mid-1980s, as state forces steadily increased the severity of their crackdowns, the CV has responded with frequent violent clashes.
Olha, tiroteio, foi exclusivo hoje até pô, minha filha. Tá aprendendo que dá trabalho pra fazer. Abre o áudio. Oi, meu amigo. Tem uma pessoa morta, hein? Olha o pobre do cidadão. Tem baleado aí, né? Ó, tu viu? Tem baleado. Olha aí, vai vendo. O policial vai atirando pro alto. Eu e você. Vamos entrando, onde a coruja pia.
One suggested explanation for the CV's violent conflict with the state is the varying levels of conditionality in state crackdowns, whether the state cracks down harder on violent cartel behavior. On November 19, 2016, a police helicopter of the Rio de Janeiro police was shot down by small arms fire during a clash with gang members of Comando Vermelho and crashed in a ditch. All 4 police officers on board were killed. In June 2018, the Red Command launched attacks on a Bolivian army base in Porvenir and a Brazilian police station in Epitaciolandia, in both instances stealing weapons and ammunition. After Pablo Escobar's death, Luis Fernando de Costa, a.k.a. Fernandinho Beramar, alias Seaside Freddy, led the CV's business dealings with the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, a.k.a. FARC, the Colombian guerrilla group that entered the cocaine trade following the death of Pablo Escobar. In 2001, he was captured by the Colombian military following a shootout and was extradited to Brazil. The CV had established a working relationship with the FARC led by Luis, where the CV procured arms and ammunition, which they delivered to the FARC in exchange for their supply of cocaine. Beginning in 2008, in an effort to combat the widespread gang-related violence, Rio State Police forces implemented a new pacification strategy, inspired by notions of community-oriented policing. The strategy, which proceeds in stages, begins with state occupation of a target favela using overwhelming military force, followed by the installation of a proximity policing unit, UPP, which remains in the favela after military withdrawal. Rather than eliminating the drug trade, the UPPs were primarily tasked with securing the favela communities from gang-related violence. The early period of pacification in 2008 saw 40 UPP battalions installed and 200 communities pacified, and was largely successful for the state. The CV, which suddenly ceased their violent confrontation with state forces, ceded significant territory to the state. One UPP effort left the CV's principal stronghold firmly in the hand of the state for the first time in more than a generation. Despite its initial success for the state, corruption and overexpansion caused erosion in the pacification system, and by 2013 the program began to break down. Since then, violent clashes between the CV and state forces have surged. In 2016, following the collapse of a 20-year truce between the CV and the PCC, violence surged further. In recent months, sources consistently report frequent violent clashes between the CV and the PCC, as well as other rival gang groups. Additionally, an emerging struggle for control of the Amazon region has intensified between rival gangs including the CV, seeking access to the valuable trafficking routes in the Colombia-Brazil-Peru tri-border region, the CV, the PCC, the Familia do Norte, and Colombian militia groups including the Border Command and the Carolina Ramirez Front have violently fought, contributing to a significant uptick in regional fatalities. Armed militia groups in Rio present another growing challenge for the CV. Militia groups, formed by former and current police officers purporting to fight crime, have grown to control substantial territory throughout Rio. In recent years, violence between militias and gangs has intensified. In 2021, clashes between gangs and militias were responsible for 28% of reported fatalities in Rio. Until this day, the war is ongoing, and many doubt it will ever stop. This is the story of Comando Vermelho, Brazil's most dangerous gang. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. It's Focus for Better. Until next time.